Hey there. So I wanted to come on really quick and talk about processing emotion. I think I have probably like 20 minutes. So this is going to be a real quick and dirty, but for the members of the Financial School for Spinners, I'm going to create a whole module around just this topic because there's so many parts to it. I want you guys to really understand and know how to do it. But for everyone else, I just want to tell you what you need to know right now because something came up in our Tuesday coaching call around processing emotions, specifically processing anger. And I think that there's a misunderstanding about feelings, right? And what emotion is and how we're supposed to feel things. And if you go to the extreme of toxic positivity, you're not supposed to linger in any negative emotion. Anytime you feel something negative, you're supposed to turn towards positive and just kind of live in that happy, positive unicorns and rainbows and ignore the negative. But that's not really how life works. And what happens if and when you do that is that you end up burying resentment, anger, bitterness, and they come out in other parts of your body because these energies, your emotions create an energy, and these energies don't disappear. They don't evaporate. They just lodge somewhere in your joints or in your organs, and they end up becoming cancer or arthritis or whoever knows what else, right? They still live within you. So we have to process them all the way through. So this came up on Tuesday, and we were talking to Gazi, and she is going to process her anger, right? So that was her assignment for the week. So this morning, she sent me a message to say she's processing anger, but what she finds is that she's getting more angry. Like the more she processes the anger, the more angry she feels, and it's spewing out. So it's not like she's lashing out at people, but she's just like she feels it like lashing out in her day-to-day life, which is not fun, right? So I wanted to come on and offer some help for that because she was like, "What should I be doing?" Glad you asked. So let's talk about it. So again, there'll be a more complete, reasoning and module around processing emotion, but here is a quick and dirty specifically to help if you're processing anger and you find yourself becoming more angry. So the first thing is that you need to know that there are ways to handle feelings and emotions that are not processing them, that are not feeling them. And one of those is distracting yourself from it, meaning you start to feel a bubbling up of something, you grab your phone and you scroll, right? Or you can distract yourself. So I said that already. You can distract yourself from it. You can avoid it altogether, meaning something happens to you, and instead of feeling it, you just call someone and you vent to them about it, and you tell your best friend, and then that doesn't make you feel better. So then you call your mom and you vent to her about it, and you just call people and you vent to them about it. You're avoiding actually feeling it. Another way of handling emotion that's not feeling the emotion is medicating the emotion, like trying to cover up the emotion, right? And we do this often with food. We feel some kind of distress and we run to the carbs, right? We have to like get some sort of like something to medicate that emotion that's not actually feeling it through. Some people do this with drugs or alcohol or sex, relationships, right? Is like instead of feeling our feelings, we need to go get something that's going to make it all feel better. So these are not ways of processing or feeling your feelings. The only way to fix this, vibration in your body and to like get it resolved is to feel it all the way through, which is hard. And that's the reason that humans don't want to feel it. We would rather do these other things to get around it. We go Netflix binge, right? That's avoiding it too, or distracting ourselves from it. Um, but what I want you to do is to feel it because a lot of times we're shopping in order to distract, avoid, or medicate ourselves from our feelings. And so, particularly if you're a spender and you want to um, not overspend or you want to hit your financial goals, processing your emotions sometimes is like the fastest way to get there. It's also hard. So, I want to show you how to do it. Okay, so let's talk about anger specifically. Um, You want to give it your full undivided attention. Why are we giving it attention? This is the analogy I want you to always think of when it comes to processing emotion. I want you to imagine that you're feeling whatever it is. If it's anger, I want you to imagine that it's a small, tiny version of you. Maybe she's 5 years old, right? A 5-year-old version of you. If you have children in your life, I want you to picture those children, right? It's the easiest way to do this. You picture those children. When something is happening with a child, the healthy thing, I don't know what everybody does, but the healthy thing is to get down on eye level with the child and listen to them, right? If a child is freaking out, get down on eye level with them and listen to them. Touch them in some way, I make eye contact and let them know that you're listening to them. Okay. And then what happened? I hear you. I understand, right? The worst thing to do with a child is to stand over the child and yell down at them things like, be quiet. That's enough. You're fine, right? Like all these things that discount their feelings, all these things that make them feel not validated. That makes children scream louder. Or if they're, traumatized, they just shut down, right? And we don't want to do this. So what we're doing when we process emotion is basically talking to our inner child, because that something happened to us when we were small that makes this new trauma become like amplified, and it just takes us back to childhood, which is why we're like, it's not safe. Whatever that emotion is, for some people it's safe to express anger. For a lot of people, especially if you are, you know brown skinned person, it's not safe for you to express anger. So we've learned how to squash it down. We don't want to do that anymore. All right. So you um imagine that your emotion is a small version of you, a small child. You want to take your energy down to the level. You want to listen without trying to fix, right? You're not trying to fix, you're just listening and you're observing and you're making space and you're creating a safe place to feel that emotion. So ultimately, if you're a big picture kind of person, what we're trying to do is to understand what our feelings feel like in our body, like all of our feelings. So, when you start to feel anger, stop immediately what you're doing. If you can get to a place where you can kind of just lay down on the bed, like if you're at home, you're washing dishes and you start to feel the anger bubbling up, just stop, go to your room, lay down on the bed. I like to say starfish yourself. And just feel. Don't say anything at first. Just kind of feel where you feel the anger in your body. Now, Gazi told us that it was in her jaw, right? So you feel it in your jaw. I want you to just give all your attention to that feeling. Now, emotions are vibrations, right? They're vibrations in your body. So they will locate themselves somewhere. If you are still enough and undistracted enough, you will locate that vibration. So she felt it in her jaw as we were talking about it. What I want you to do is just like if it was a small child, I want you to give all your attention to it. And I want you to watch it and just, you can have your eyes closed, but like watch it physically, right? What does it feel like? What does it look like? And I mean everything, like, what's the texture of it? Is it smooth? Is it rough? Is it fuzzy? What is the vibration of it? Is it oscillating? Is it vibrating? Is it pulsating? Right? Is it just there? Is it expanding or is it contracting? Is it squeezing? Like all of every way you can describe it. Um, what color is it? Is it yellow? Is it green? Is it black? Is it smooth? Is it what's the temperature? Is it hot? Is it burning hot? Is it cold? Right? What is it, getting warm and cold and warm and cold? Like all of the qualities of it. What does it remind you of? Right? Is it like a steel rod pressing down? Is it heavy? Is it feeling so heavy, like your jaw's heavy? You got to clench your jaw up to hold the bottom half of your face up. Like, describe it, right? I want you to give so much attention to it that you know what anger feels like in your body. We all have a sort of an emotional dictionary, right? Like we all know what different emotions feel like in our body, but we haven't given attention to them to really know those emotions. We all have them, but we don't really know. So anytime an emotion comes up, I want you to change, instead of getting a dopamine hit from distracting from the emotion, I want you to get your dopamine hit from saying, oh, I get to learn how to feel, jealousy. I get to learn what my body feels like when I'm feeling anger or sadness or resentment. This is another opportunity for me to learn myself, right? That's where I want you to get your dopamine hit. So, um, so that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna lay down, you're gonna describe it, you're gonna feel it. Now, a lot of times we think it's gonna take too long, right? I don't have time for this. I'm washing the dishes. I don't have time to stop and feel this emotion. It's gonna take a minute and a half. Literally, it's going to take 90 seconds or less because it's a flood of chemicals in your body, and that's how long they last. They get absorbed up by the chemicals, get absorbed by the cells. It doesn't take very long. But your diva is going to tell you it's going to take a long time, right? Like you don't have time for this. You have a busy day. You can't process this emotion, right? It's going to take 90 seconds. Please give yourself 90 seconds. If you know that 90 seconds now is going to prevent all kinds of issues down later in the future, please take the 90 seconds now. It won't take that long. So what's going to happen is you lay down, you feel the emotion, you feel it in your body, you describe it, you get yourself really calm and really small where you can give it your undivided attention, and then it's going to dissipate. And it's like, okay, it's gone now. All right, get up, go about your business. Now, if you're in a position where you can't stop, like you literally can't, like you're driving down the street or you're in the middle of a meeting and you can't stop and starfish yourself, obviously, then I would suggest scheduling a time when you can. I personally process emotions every morning. So every morning before I get out of bed, as soon as I wake up, I'm like, okay, how am I feeling? And I try to catch whatever feeling it is. Usually it's something left over from the day before. And I ask myself out loud, how do I feel? Because my brain will remind me, like, oh, you remember what happened yesterday? Mm-hmm. Right. And so I'm like, oh, yes. And I take myself back to that situation and I feel those feelings I was feeling. So scheduling your time either in the morning when you're already laying in bed or at night. You can think about what happened during the day or what happened that caused that anger in the first place while you're laying in bed. You can bring that up because inevitably, if that emotion is still raw, when you think about that situation, it's going to bring up that feeling. You're going to be like, oh, right? Process it then. That way you're always processing. And the more you process, the less is going to come up. So when you stop and give your attention to the anger, the next time it'll come up, it will be less intense and then less intense and less intense. It'll be less intense and less frequent until it completely dissipates, which means you process it the whole way through. So this means it's not going to happen in a one and done situation, but the more you give your undivided attention, the faster it will be gone, like during the other times of your life. Meaning like you're living your life and anger keeps coming up, like Ghazi's talking about, like it keeps just like spewing out. It's because it's not ready to be done yet, but you want it to spew out in a controlled environment where you're processing it actively. So my advice is to process first thing in the morning and last thing at night, like while you're in bed. Like give yourself a minute and a half in the morning and at nighttime to process the emotion all the way through, because then during the day you may not have it crop up so long. So what's the reason for doing this? One thing is you start to trust yourself. So what's happening in your body when you have when you have unprocessed emotion or when you have emotions that you've stuffed down, what's wrong is that your body, that you don't trust yourself to feel those feelings. Your body stops trusting you. Now, some people, and this kind of goes back to what processing emotion is not, some people act out their emotion. Like you see someone and they're acting angry. That's not processing anger. That's acting angry. Acting angry is another way of distracting yourself from the feeling. That person is not processing the anger, right? Processing anger looks like this. right? It doesn't look like yelling and cussing and screaming. That's not processing anger. So you want to allow your body to trust you with your emotions so that you have this consistent, um, you're consistently processing the emotion so that any emotion is safe for you to feel. If any emotion is safe for you to feel, then your body is not going to stuff down, push down, shove down emotions, and it won't make you feel like you're stuck in any particular situation. Because a lot of times, the reason that we get stuck is because we have some unresolved emotions. So, like what Gazi was talking about on Tuesday, moving forward in her business, paying, being a really good steward with money, it was hard because she had all this unresolved money trauma of something that happened with another person. It was like making her angry. And so once our body can trust us with emotions, it can present these emotions knowing that we're not going to beat ourselves up over them, right? Like if you feel angry, I'm not going to beat you up or like shove it down, right? And remember, it's a small child. We're getting down to the level. We're not saying, be quiet. It's not the right time. We don't want you to, right? If you're doing all that, your body's going to like hide those emotions from you. Ultimately, the place that we want to get to is your body trusts you so much with the emotions. It's going to tell you something valuable. So practice um, processing emotions. And then the next step is you're going to get to that point where you're processing emotion. You're holding, I want you to hold the anger and then ask it, what are you trying to tell me? What do you want me to know? Because if you remember when we talk about using our intuition, that emotion is your compass, that's your guidance. Your emotion is really trying to communicate something to you. We use our imagination to communicate with God, our higher power, and our higher power communicates back to us through emotion. So there's actually a message buried inside the emotion, but we can't get the message out until it's safe to actually feel it. So the first step is to learn how to feel it and practice feeling it all the way through. And the next step is going there and asking it, what are you trying to tell me? What do you need me to know? And it's going to tell you something. And that thing that it tells you is going to be usually like a 3 or 4 word, very short phrase that is profound. It's going to be so helpful. It's going to tell you what your next step is, or it's going to answer or solve a problem that you're having right now. But your body has to trust you in order to talk to you. It's kind of like if you have a child and that, even if you don't have children, if you have nieces and nephews, right? That child is not going to tell you something personal or secret if it doesn't trust you to hold the space for it, right? If you have a little girl and, um, she did something wrong, right? And you're like, what did you do? What did you do? It's very hard for her to tell you what she did if she thinks that you're going to yell at her, right? She doesn't want to tell you. She's going to hide from you. She's going to keep it a secret. But if she knows that you're the nice auntie and you don't judge her or criticize her, it'll be easier for her to tell you what's happening, knowing that you're going to still love her, basically. That's what we're doing for our body. We want to make sure that we let our bodies know, hey, I love you. I love you enough to stop what I'm doing. Nothing is more important than me feeling this emotion right now. Like the dishes can wait. This other thing can wait. Like getting out of bed can wait, right? Like nothing is more important than me taking 90 seconds to hear what you have to tell me. After you do that consistently, your body is going to relax into knowing that you really are here to be here for it. You really do want to know what the messages are in your emotions. And it'll relax and it'll start to tell you. And when it tells you, that information is so helpful, it'll help you get to the next level. But start with just giving it your undivided attention, describing it in every way that you can. Sometimes, even, I remember this happened to me the very first time I processed emotion. I felt like I had a big golf ball or like a tennis ball. It was big, a big green tennis ball stuck in my throat. That's how I felt. And I would have this often. I had this for years. I remember asking some of my colleagues in medicine what it could be. I remember looking up throat chakras. Like I was trying to figure out what was this squeak. It felt like I was choking myself, strangling myself from the inside out. And it started in like 2018. I remember it. Um, I remember the very first time it happened. Like that's how dramatic it was. I had this really horrible feeling. So Brig, my coach in 2021, was I was telling her about it and she was teaching me how to process emotion. So I went to it, that feeling, and I described it and I realized that it was anger. I sometimes when you have a feeling like that where it's you don't know what the feeling is, you can ask it like, who are you? Who are you? And mine said anger. And it was never safe for me to feel anger. So that's why I didn't even have a name for it. I didn't even know what it was. I was just like, well, I feel like I'm choking. And that was my anger. So I asked it, I went to it, I described, I did everything I'm asking you guys to do. And I sat with it and I sat with it and it dissipated. But behind, like inside of it, so it's like this ball of anger. And when that melted away, because I gave my attention to it, inside there was a little golf ball, a little hard one, right? A tennis ball is like fuzzy and it was like pulsating. That went away, and inside there was a hard nugget, a little like a plastic one stuck in there, and it was sadness. And that was like, it blew my mind. Anger for me is like protecting sadness. And now I know it because I'm so intimately aware of my feelings that if I feel that, I know like sometimes people do things. I'm a nice person, right? So when people do things and like I feel sad that I'm like betrayed or something like that, my anger creeps up because I'm angry, but my anger is just protecting sadness because sadness is a really scary feeling to feel, especially if it's people close to you and they betray you and you feel like, I don't want to feel so sad about that. Anger would crop up. So sometimes our emotions are protecting us from other emotions that are even scarier to feel. But what we learn from this activity is that you don't die, right? You won't die from feeling anger. You won't die from feeling sadness. It only lasts 90 seconds and it becomes easier and easier to process. But before you learn how to do this, it feels like you're going to die. It feels like you want to do anything else in the world but feel this feeling. And I remember in 2019, I was working with Lisa Nichols, and she was taking us through processes. And I remember being so terrified of it felt like I was juggling all the balls of life. And if I dropped a ball and I had these tiny babies, like the whole world will fall apart. And I just remember being so resistant to like letting my guard down and really feeling my feelings because I felt like once I did, the floodgates would just break open and I would never be able to put everything back together again. Like everything would just fall apart. And I thought I would go into a deep depression and not be able to get out of bed and not be able to leave the room and not be able to take care of my kids and not be able to go to work. Like that's how much stress I felt holding my life together. And the opposite thing happened. I learned how to process emotion and I broke free from it. It's almost as if the emotion is holding us hostage. It's a crippling feeling of like, don't you dare. It's kind of like when someone is abusing you and they tell you like, if you tell anyone, I'm going to kill you. And you're just like, oh, I better not tell anyone. But then the actuality, when you tell someone, like everything gets better. You're like, oh, I told someone and now the police are coming or whatever it is, right? Like you in your mind, you feel like you can't express it. But when you do express it, you're free. That's the way it felt. So I felt so scared to express it. I thought I would just like I wouldn't be able to stop crying. I was like, if I let my guard down and feel sad, I'm gonna cry and never be able to stop. I'm gonna have to be institutionalized. I'm gonna be so depressed and be on medication, right? Like that's how I felt. But what actually happened was I learned how to process emotion, and now I'm no longer afraid to process emotion. I'm not afraid to process it. I welcome it. I'm like, oh, great. Here's something else for me to process. Now, it doesn't feel great in the moment, but I'm happy to get to know myself more and get to trust myself more. So I had a similar experience to Ghazi in 2023. Um, I Now it wasn't anyone's fault. I did this, right? Like I paid a coach, and I didn't get a program. I didn't get what I needed. I didn't, I wasn't, I didn't understand that what I was buying is not what I needed. Right. And then there was this whole, it was a lot of money, and it was this no refund policy. Don't even ask us for a refund kind of policy, which should have been the red flag that I thought of at first. But in the end, I got like very little return on my investment, very little return. And I had so much anger around that, right? I was so upset. I had made this money mistake, and I had caused so much stress in my family, and it was just this really horrible thing, and I had so much anger. So for about 6 months I just had this anger I didn't know what to do with. And then for the next 6 months I processed. It wasn't 6 months, like 3 months of just crazy wild anger, and then like 3 months of processing the anger. And it took a while, but on the other side of it, I don't have as much anger. And it's still a process that when I feel it, like it doesn't even crop up anymore. Now it's like transformed into something else, maybe some sadness. But you really, like, I had a similar experience, and we talked about that on the coaching call. And it's kind of like I know what that feels like, and I know how hard that is, but on the other side of it, it really does feel okay. And you're able to move past and move on and even invest in yourself again, knowing what you know now. But at the beginning, when you still have those active feelings, it's not good to like rationalize through it, right? It's not good to be like, well, at least I learned this, or at least, the good thing that came out of it was this. Like that's um trying to rationalize it. That's also distracting from feeling it. So you won't feel it if you're trying to rationalize it. If you're like, well, God wanted me to learn this lesson. That's great, but feel it first. Feel it all the way through before you start to realize, why you had to go through that experience. So I hope this was helpful. I do want to really like break this down more. I'll put those modules in the membership site once it's done, and I'll let you guys know that it'll be there, because this is one of the most useful and beneficial parts about being in the program, is knowing how to understand yourself and process your emotion all the way through, and really be able to hear that supernatural guidance that gets you to the next level. It's going to be majorly valuable. All right. So talk to you later. Bye.